Good afternoon, everybody. In Dubai, it's afternoon. I'm calling in from Dubai, and wherever you are, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know there are some people calling from all the way on the other side of the planet. Um, well, thank you very much. This session is about an hour and a half long. We'll probably have some time for Q&A. Hopefully, it's customer experience. Obviously, everybody, especially customer experience professionals, have dealt with journeys and journey design and journey mapping, possibly design thinking, but uh, the more dense, sort of not so much fun topic of how do you actually institutionalize customer experience across the whole organization, the topic of ensuring that you have the right operating model for customer experience maybe is one that not every customer experience professional deals with in their day-to-day job, but it's a critical part of making sure that customer experience runs smoothly in the organization and your team, the CX team, is actually able to be productive and achieve their goals, because in isolation nothing happens, but the CX team and CX professionals really need the rest of the organization to be able to deliver on their customer experience goals and objectives. So we'll maybe start with a quick understanding of what are the key challenges in CX transformation, in organizations' customer experience transformation journeys. And then we'll look at how organizations actually want to achieve scale in their CX transformations. So moving beyond pilot individual customer experience journey maps and journey redesign efforts that are happening on a pilot scale and an individual sort of project level, and making sure that this actually is organization wide and the engine of the organization is working that way in a continuous and seamless manner. And then we'll look at selected parts of that operating model to dig a bit deeper into what actually we mean by all those customer experience operating model changes that need to happen, and how do you actually start your journey towards transforming the operating model of the company. Of course, this is not something a CX professional, him or herself, does in an organization. This requires board level and possibly board level, CEO and XCOM level decision on transforming the various parts of the operating model to make it acceptable for a customer experience transformation. So we obviously all know customer experience used to be quite simple. We used to go into a shop. The shop had an owner had his family working there, and they all knew you by name. You walked in, the organization, the shop owner or a clerk knew you by name, gave you exactly the type of products you wanted in the way you wanted it. If you didn't have your credit card or your cash, they were more than happy to allow you to pay for it later. That they knew you. There was a one-on-one intimate relationship with the customer. But as organizations get bigger, and this is where the organizations need to obviously structure themselves in a bit of hierarchy to ensure that expertise sits where it belongs and there's some sort of efficiency in the way the company does business. So one of the unfortunate side effects of that is siloed mentality in organizations and the lack of collaboration and cooperation between functions of the organization. So what customer experience professionals, when they enter this environment, they often come in with really good intentions and motivation, and they want to transform the organization and ensure that the organization is more CX focused. But what they face with is the wall of silos, and they very quickly become frustrated because they see that their efforts, while maybe on a micro scale seem they're productive, but they cannot really encourage all the other silos in the organization to work efficiently. So frustration, and eventually possibly getting extremely unhappy and being satisfied with the micro level progress that happens in organizations. So we actually asked customer experience professionals what their main challenges are, other than outside within at an organizational level, not just at their professional level. And very, very often, all the challenges that CX professionals see at an organizational level are misalignment in the organization. So whether it's the organization's different silos not working each other, the culture is not there, the talent is not there, the right tools are not provided to the CX professionals and the rest of the organization to do what they really want to do. These are mainly the areas that professionals that. Sorry, can we have the audience on mute? Thank you. So not to worry though, this is actually something that we see in most organizations, and the problem is really that organizations that are undergoing their customer experience transformation need to have a plan of how to move beyond pilot projects to what we call CX at scale across the organization. And that at scale is what transformation is about, and it requires an organization-wide transformation plan. But how do you do it, and where do you start? So let's start first by saying, well, where do you not start, and what are the mistakes you should actually avoid, and what organizations fail to do that makes their CX transformation not achieve its goals and objectives. If we look at the main CX transformation challenges, what we see is first, these are based on feedback from customers and research. First is the organization structure is broken. You have organizational structures that were built for the past, meaning by product lines. I even remember I used to work in an organization where the organizational structure was a separate department, completely separate department for website, completely separate department for mobile, and completely separate department for their TV. This was a multimedia company. Whereas in today's world, we know that that's just not how it works. These are all individual channels, but the product is the same, and you want to distribute it across all these channels. You cannot really have silos in that way. So those breakdowns and the way the organization is structured prevents journey view of the customer and a journey view of transformation in the organization. Second is misalignment of customer experience understanding. Each person or each manager in the company and within each of these silos and functions really understands customer experience very differently. Some see it as customer service, some see it at the product level only, and rarely do you have people that see it end to end across all the touch points and journeys and are able to and willing to take that responsibility to that transformation. Third is measurement. Because we know anything that's not measured is really not managed. So measurement is quite difficult in customer experience because you're talking about soft things such as customer satisfaction, and how do you link it with hard things such as operational level process metrics that you have in your organization. And then the fourth thing is companies fail to convert data into insights. Insights are what drive decisions, and without the right decisions and the right insights, the customer experience transformation fails. Fourth is for that data and those insights to be available, you need the right, and of course the customer experience journey transformation itself, journey redesigns, you need the right IT. It's one of the big challenges is that organizations have legacy IT that doesn't allow the flexibility that CX professionals and the broader organization needs to be able to deliver that changes in customer experience. One area, and I hinted to this in my previous employer, the online is treated as yet another silo. So we look at some organizations say, okay, let's launch the website department. That's not how it works. The website is a channel of the company. That's how another touch point of where the customer views you. And organizations often fail to view all the touch points and channels as part of the same customer experience, and journeys traverse these channels. So having a more like omni-channel experience and not treating the online as a completely separate silo in and of itself. Finally, organizations try to do everything, but they actually end up doing nothing. So they distribute their focus into multiple, sometimes even I've seen hundreds of initiatives, each of which was very thoughtful and insightful, but in reality, it defocuses the organization, and most often than not, most of them don't achieve their goals because there's no real focus. So with those challenges in mind, as it's very clear, most of them are related to how a company runs. And how a company runs is basically your operating model. So let's look at why a robust operating model is actually important for uh, any organization. So you're often CX professionals or maybe strategic planning department that's looking at customer experience as one of the key pillars of your strategy. Strategy often looks really good on paper. Well, in my case as a consultant, on slides. They often look really good on slides. The problem is when the rubber hits the road, does the reality reflect what you have on the slides? And that's where you need to make sure what you've designed on the slides, that strategy, actually not only makes sense, but the engine of the organization is able to deliver it. The engine being the operating model. So how do you make sure that whatever strategy you develop is executable or implementable? Well, you have your customer experience strategy. You need to make sure that there's a target operating model built or designed on paper to make sure that it's aligned with what that strategy wants to achieve over the next few years. That target operating model then starts getting implemented through a strong methodical strategy execution management process to ensure that your organization has the right execution muscle to deliver the goals and objectives that your customer experience strategy has designed. So developing a CX strategy without developing the target operating model is doomed to failure because you're not giving the organization the roadmap of how it needs to change to achieve that CX strategy that you have. So what do we mean by target operating model or a customer experience operating model? Well, customer experience operating model, or any operating model for that matter, is the bridge between strategy and execution. So that's the engine of the organization of how, think of it as a car. You tell a car you want to go to X destination, the engine has to work to be able to take you from point A to point B. So whatever you've put on that map, which is your strategy, and the destination, which is your execution, needs to be done by that engine of the car. And that engine has components. So if you look at a typical operating model, the most important, let's say, baseline building blocks is the organizational structure. Is your organizational structure organized in such a way that it encourages what you want them to do? We gave examples earlier that organizational structures that are siloed might not be the best in delivering end-to-end journey experiences for customers. And there might be things that you need to solve. You might not need to do a complete revamp, but there's certain fine tuning that needs to happen in the organizational structure. Second is governance and power, where it's not clear who is responsible for what and what are the decision rights in the organization, then nobody actually does anything and nobody knows where to go. So power and governance is an important part of it. Accountabilities and measurement, what's not measured is not managed. Data and systems, if you want to measure and if you want to make decisions, then you need the right systems and data in place. People and talent, without the right talent, and obviously we have tons of CX professionals in this seminar and this conference, it's people like you and other skill sets that are critical for that transformation to happen in customer experience, and the actual processes that need to change or be put in place to make sure that your organization is able to deliver. These are the main 6 building blocks of any customer experience, of any operating model for that matter. But let's look at customer experience operating models in more detail. A typical customer experience, this doesn't mean that every organization has to do all of these things. It depends on whether you're in parallel to your customer experience transformation, you're running a digital transformation or not, in which case most of these apply. But essentially, any organization needs to have a very structured approach of how you want to transform your existing operating model, what parts of it are relevant for customer experience, and what parts need to change and what parts need to be kept, and also how they all work with each other. Okay. The ultimate goal of any CX transformation is to put in place a customer experience management process that makes sure that on a continuous basis, not a one-off, but on a continuous basis, the organization itself, again, not consultants, but organization itself, is able to do regular, continuous, daily fine-tuning of the customer experience. So on a micro level, let's say one individual customer has a problem, you have a process of how the customer experience or the front office staff are able to resolve those individual issues. And when there's a systematic issue or when there's a redesign of a journey that needs to happen, then there's a clear structural approach of how you want to do that change in the customer journey or the back office or front office processes related to that customer journey redesign. So now that we have a clear understanding or at least alignment in what we mean by a CX operating model, let's try to go into the 4 of the main elements: organization, measurement, talent, and tools and systems. So on an organizational level, this could become a very complex topic, but you need to understand at a very high level that organizations, and I'm sure as CX professionals, you face this on a daily basis, because more often than not, CX professionals and CX ahead of customer experience in organizations that are just embarking on their transformation or on their customer experience transformation journey, they don't have a very clear position in the organization or roles and responsibilities. So at the very early stages, a CEO decides, we want customer experience because it's a sexy title and we see everybody's doing it. So he tells every function, marketing, sales, customer care, etc., put some initiatives on customer experience. So each one of them does their own siloed initiatives, decentralized, and possibly hires a CX professional within his particular function, but it's decentralized and they're not really coordinated. And as we all know, customer experience is about end-to-end journeys across touch points. So this approach really tends to fail in the early stages. What happens next is some companies decide to take a hybrid approach. So they hire a more senior customer experience head. They put them either reporting to the CEO or possibly to one of the CXOs in the organization, possibly CMO or customer care, various departments. And that person doesn't have enough staff, but he's responsible for coordination. He's not responsible for decision authority or accountability, because he is essentially a coordinator between different functions of the organization. The muscle is still within those functions. Finally, a bit more organizations that take customer experience a bit more seriously and maybe have tried and tested and learned, they actually provide that customer experience head with a full team, what we call a center of excellence, COE. That central excellence has a small core team that has the necessary skill sets, but then also has the responsibility of coordination. But it's a dedicated, accountable CX organization that has measurement and accountability for the end-to-end journeys now in this particular model. So what does that model look like? If you look at the head of CX at the very top of this slide, typically he would have a permanent team of, let's say, journey managers. These are, for example, the onboarding journey. There's a journey manager who manages on a full-time basis the onboarding journey for, let's say, a bank's customers, deposit or loans. Then he has journey strategist who understands the basic concepts of customer journey design and helps the journey managers in their day-to-day work of how to redesign journeys. Within that, you have his own dedicated team. And then you have, of course, the voice of customer VOC team that provides the insights and data to the journey managers. In organizations that are also digitally ready or digitally transforming, they're using Agile. Not all organizations use Agile, but the ones that are in digital transformation use Agile, and that's where scrums and scrum teams and squads come in. And they use these scrum teams or squads by bringing in resources within those scrum teams or squads from the various responsibles in the organization, from analytics, from product development, from marketing, digital marketing, etc. And they sit in that scrum team and they work together on assessing and redesigning those journeys. Because these people are representative of the various functions in the organization, they are there given the authority and responsibility to not only design a new product or a new journey, but also implement it in the organization. So what this squad teams or let's say customer experience journey scrum teams manage is the actual process of, on a continuous basis, redesigning or updating the customer journeys. if we take the onboarding example of a bank, this team is fully dedicated to onboarding, journey redesign, and is continuously monitoring and upgrading it. Think of it just like Apple's App Store or Apple's iOS. On a continuous basis, Apple has a team that is continuously upgrading and redesigning and conceptualizing what the iOS needs to look like. And you see on a regular basis, updates of the iOS comes to you automatically. That's because they have a dedicated squad team that are working on various aspects of this iOS, and they're continuously improving. That's the same concept that happens with customer journeys, no matter what your industry, okay? So what do these squad teams usually look like? Usually they have a room that's dedicated to that particular journey, or at least on a part-time basis. And they bring in, like we said, resources from various parts of the organization within that squad team to be able to support them with the various. Essentially, it's a self-contained team that is able to design and implement that particular change in the journey. Okay. So easy enough, right? Not really, but we hope it's easy. Usually these things look easier on paper than they are in practice, but they are essential parts of any CX transformation. So on the measurement side, I'm sure most CX professionals find this the most frustrating because they do a lot of good work in the organization. They try very hard, even with the silos of the organization. But what they fail to demonstrate is the results of the benefits of what they've done. Measurement is a big challenge in CX. So Fahid, if you can maybe start the survey. So we have a poll. Before we go to the next slide, I wanted to maybe allocate 1 minute. If you can just quickly fill out this poll. Is it live, Femit, the poll?
Yes, I am putting it live. This is for slide 27, right?
Slide 27, yes.
Okay. Hope you can see it.
Yes, so if you can please fill out this form so we can get a view before we go on to the measurement chapter. Okay, 20 more seconds. Okay, should we move on? You can maybe close it.
You want me to close it?
Yeah,
I've got four people who's responded.
Yeah, it's just we're going on to the answers, so it's better to just close it so people don't lose their answers.
I will
Okay.
let it now.
Yeah, it's kind of like an exam in a school. You show the results after, and then people go back and change their answers. Okay. So let's see if we can. Is this visible? Do I press share results or? Let's see. So it seems that most of you guys have chosen, yes, I feel there are a lot of CX benefits that go unmeasured. And second one is, I think there are a few benefits that go unmeasured, but we managed to capture the important ones. And actually that's also what, that's also what the respondents in the survey have said globally. So CX professionals actually have this frustration that there's a lot of benefits in the work they do, but it's not really measured. Either, well, there are various reasons. Either it's just a soft target that's difficult to quantify, or the IT systems don't allow some of these things to be measured in a consistent way. So let's move on to the next survey. Famid, if you can also bring up this next survey for slide 29. What metrics does your organization use to specifically measure returns from your CX initiatives? And you can choose all that apply, and we'll give it maybe another 40 seconds or so. Femid, is it up?
I'm launching. Yes, it's up.
Okay, 40 seconds for this one. As we saw, you were quite efficient in the first one. You can choose multiple, by the way, in case you have multiple of these. So some organizations have, for example, specific revenue uplift targets or cross-selling targets, and they have also CSAT or NPS or CES scores. So if you have multiple of these, then do choose whichever ones apply. Okay, 1 minute is over. So should we end the poll? And let's see what you guys have chosen. Customer effort score. Wow. Okay, that's the surprise. 2 of 4, and then revenue count, etc. So yes, very good. Now let's see actually what survey results show broadly. So NPS, CSAT, and CES scores are usually the largest ones in customer experience, and that's why exactly there's a problem, because these are soft customer feedback targets, and many CX professionals and organizations more broadly can't link these to hard data from inside the organization, or let's say operational data. So how do successful organizations do that? Well, successful organizations are actually able to quantify the link between the soft measurements such as CSAT or NPS or CES to hard quantifiable operational data within the organizations. For example, time to apply, time to activate, time to receive your debit card PIN, or whatever else from your various organizations that you have in terms of operational dashboards. So they're able to actually create those links. How do they create those links? This is where the soft becomes science and more hard data based on regression analysis and data analytics. And data science, you're able to create that quantifiable link where you say, okay, what's the driver model, cause effect model that I want to have? I want to achieve a top line customer. Sorry, let me put the pen here. I want to achieve a top-line customer experience metric, for example, CSAT or customer satisfaction or journey satisfaction. What is the main driver of that? What journeys are linked to that? What touch point level metrics are relevant? And what service level metrics are relevant? And then you build in a pyramid the cause-effect relationship, and you validate those using data science and some regression analysis to see exactly X% increase in one causes what percent increase in the next one. And that's how you actually create that cause effect model. And you're able then to not only have top line CSAT scores, but also cascade it even to the individual department and sub-department and team level, where you say, call center manager, this is what you need to do in terms of speed of response. This is how it impacts CSAT at the company-wide level. So let's look at the next area, which is talent. Talent is obviously one of the very, very important parts of any customer experience transformation. If you don't have the right people, no matter what you measure and what organization and tools you put in place, it's just going to be ineffective if people really don't know what they need to do. So the first thing is customer experience teams themselves. Many organizations, this is a survey we conducted in the Q4 of 2018. Customer experience professionals tend to be, or team sizes tend to be much larger as a percent compared to other non-CX focused organizations. So we looked at laggards and leaders. So laggards is this part here, and leaders is this pink one. There's a gap of almost double. So in leading organizations, their CX team is double in size. Why? Again, remember that organizational structure slide where we said they centralize the CX department. They put a dedicated center of excellence in CX, which requires that particular team size. It's still not as huge as your IT department or your sales and marketing department, but it's definitely a much larger team than 1, 2, or 3 that a laggard organization usually hires and then just gives them the title of CX manager. Second part is, with that huge team, what type of talent do they usually have? So you have a combination of technical, analytical talent and business and communication talent. Both of them are extremely important in CX. Why? Because CX is, at the end of the day, a coordination role across different silos of the organization. So the business and communication talent is extremely important. The communication talent is extremely important, the soft skills, but it's also actually for the CX mature organizations, it's delivering those end-to-end journeys through. So it means that certain elements of the task, especially the data analysis and voice of customer, these are technical and analytical skills. Sometimes you need actual software skills as well for coding and developing microservices if you're an agile organization with, let's say, microservices in your IT. So these are things that you need to, and understanding, for example, DevOps, to be able to work with your IT department in those squads and Scrum teams. So let's move on to another survey. Again, Femid, if you can bring up the survey for slide 36. Which of the following skills do your CX team members have? So if you have customer experience staff in your organization, which of these skill sets do they usually have? And again, this is, choose all that apply. And we've only done a handful of these right now. We haven't done it because for the sake of keeping the survey simple and not 30 items. So we've chosen 10 of them here. If you can select them, Femid, do you have the survey up? Okay, we'll give it about 40 minutes. Or 40 minutes, sorry, 40 seconds. Oh, I apologize. 40 minutes is the whole session. Okay, let's close the poll. And let's see the results. So software coding, wow, okay. Well, you guys are more advanced than I thought. Digital marketing and design thinking, yes, very good. So if we look at the actual survey results, what we see is digital leaders or organizations that are more digitally ready and advanced, they have their CX teams. Obviously, everybody has design thinking or journey mapping in their customer experience, or at least journey mapping. Many also do have design thinking skill sets in their teams. But rarely do you see in organizations that are just in the beginning of their transformation to have things like understanding digital channels, understanding how robotic process automation works in digital operations, understanding ecosystem management. What do you mean by ecosystem? Partner ecosystem. So organizations, their journeys are not fully end-to-end internal in the organization. You have suppliers, you have partners, you have, in the case of a bank, fintech, in the case of other firms, startups that you're partnering with to complement your journey, different parts of the journey. And then you have analytics and data science skills, agile and DevOps and Scrum, as well as coding and cybersecurity. So what you see is the difference between these digital leaders and laggards in their CX teams is that laggards only focus on journey mapping and design thinking because, for natural reasons, it's the beginning of their transformation. But leaders complement those within the CX team, a much broader set of technical skills. These are technical skills beyond just the bread and butter skill sets of design thinking and journey mapping. And they look at everything from agile skills to DevOps to other areas to make sure that their teams, their CX team, understand the rest of the organization and are able to work with the rest of the organization. The funny part is it's not just the CX teams in leaders that is different. Also, if you look at design thinking and journey mapping, what we see is that leaders have design thinking and journey mapping skills in the rest of the functions of the org, not just the CX team, but for example, strategic planning and IT department and sales and marketing have journey mapping and design thinking skills within their respective functions. So that means that they also are using these same tools and skill sets to work within their departments as well. So in terms of talent, it's not just hiring a few very good CX professionals with the right strategy map, journey mapping and design thinking skill sets, but also making sure that you have those same skill sets in other functions of the organization. Why? Because they can use it for their own work, as well as when they hop onto these squad teams that are working on journeys, they know what journey mapping is. They know what design thinking is. They can contribute to that work. So in terms of tools and systems, again, no organization is able to work effectively. I mean, you can work, but you cannot scale organization-wide without IT and the right tools and systems. So there's a survey that was done by Bain & Company where they looked at all the broad range of tools and systems that can enable a CX transformation, from sensing to deciding to acting to managing the CX journeys and CX in the organization. So you have a very long list of possible tools that organizations use. So I'm going to go into another survey. This promised to be the last survey. We take, obviously the list is very long, so I took about 10 of these tools and let's say systems and software tools. And I wanted to see whether you use these in your organization. Again, these are not methodologies. These are actual software tools that you use to allow you to do these types of work. So for example, a customer feedback management software tool that allows customer feedback management, or a software tool that allows CRM, data privacy management, etc. So maybe Femid, if you can start the poll for slide 41. And again, these are choose all that apply, and they're specifically tools, not methodologies only. And we'll give it about 40 seconds. Okay, so let's see what the results are. Okay, clear. Everybody has some sort of customer feedback management software or tool, which is very good. That's the most fundamental element. You have CRM, data privacy, self-service portal, segmentation tools for customer segmentation. Okay, let's move on to the actual survey. So what the survey shows is, yes, it's exactly more or less the areas that you have. Organizations across the board are using a lot of these software tools to enable their CX team and the broader organization to get their work more efficiently, and also get the necessary data and insights that they have. And what I don't have, because of the lack of time, we haven't put in the additional slides that shows that some of the items at the bottom of this list are the highest growth areas. So you have things like wearables and chatbots and augmented reality and specific software tools for device sensors. Is the plans for these over the next few years is very high growth compared to the established tools that are at the very top of the slide. The one thing that we see leaders do very well is that they not only use multiple tools, they make sure these tools work with each other as well. And the more tools they use and that work with each other, the more satisfied they are with those tools that they're using. If we look at the very satisfied CX professionals or organizations, I'm sorry, that are using various CX tools, the ones that are most satisfied are the ones that also make sure these tools are not only integrated with each other, but also integrated with the existing IT systems in the organization. So why is that important? Because obviously data sits in multiple parts of the organization, and channels and software tools are dispersed across the organization for various functions. Data comes from various sources. So if these systems are integrated and plugged into the various systems, it can get the necessary data to enable that process or to enable that insight with more data from various parts of the systems of the organization. So it's not just individual. Again, tools are just like humans and organizations. Silo gives you less benefit, but the more integrated it is, the more satisfied you are and the more benefits you get out of those tools. So that was at a very, very high level. Maybe we can spend a bit of time in understanding, okay, so now that we understand at a high level what the operating model building blocks are, what are the ways we can start as CX professionals, if we can maybe nudge the organization in the direction of enabling a broader transformation beyond just hiring a CX head or CX professionals. The first step we usually have is to actually do a CX maturity assessment for the organization overall. So a CX maturity assessment looks at where the market and your competition is today. So does it really make sense for you to be at the most mature stage given your market and your industry and your competition? Because sometimes you don't want to overinvest in something that is not there yet. There might be more efficient. At the end of the day, any transformation requires cost and effort and distracts the organization from other priorities. So what you need to know is the market, or soon, maybe not today, but soon, will be competitive enough that I need to excel at this? And that is at a country level, and of course at an industry level, and competition, and of course your customers. So do the customers all expect this from you today? Second is at the organizational level. Is the broader organization, not just the CX roles, is the broader organization ready? So the broader organization is the organization's operating model. Do they have the right measurement, the right performance management, the right budgeting process? One of the key important areas is allocation of funds, which we haven't talked about in this presentation. Do you have the right business processes to enable the changes that we want? Do we have the right organization and culture and the data and IT systems? Again, these are the operating model elements. Beyond these broader organizational operating model elements, you look at the actual CX processes in the organization itself. Is your CX, the way you manage CX in the organization, process mapping and process redesign and implementation, is it linked to your brand? Do you have the right CX design process in place? Do you have the right CX monitoring processes in place? Do you have the right CX improvement processes in place? And is the CX governance model aligned with the organizational overall governance model? What are your segmentation approaches? Is it do you have personas defined, and are they changing and updating over time? And finally, but not very important, is your CX strategy and everything you're doing, is it linked to your broader corporate strategy of the organization? And is it one of the top pillars in the overall corporate strategy or not? And of course, based on that, you assess how mature is your organization. And usually there's, let's say, a maturity assessment model. There are various types of these models that looks at each one of those elements, and then you can essentially map yourself in each of those elements and where the gaps are for your organization that eventually need to be filled to be able to deliver a more seamless customer experience and an operating model that is able to deliver it at scale in the organization. And those gaps between where you want to be and where you are, where the as is, it becomes the various initiatives in the roadmap of transformation that, of course, your organization would need to implement over the X number of years going forward. and you're ready to go. And so that's it. I'm hoping this was insightful for you. How many minutes do we have, Femit, for Q&A?
You have a lot of time actually, so it's fine. You can take your own time now.
Okay, so let's take any questions from the audience. Maybe we can take 2 or 3 questions.
Hi, Mohsen. My name is Irfan. I work for Al-Futtaim. Considering you've been consulting in this for a while, what do you think is of the key pillars that you identified for implementation in various organizations? What do you think is, or at least in GCC, the organization, what are the biggest challenges that the organization face in terms of implementing the strategy?
Okay, it depends on the level of maturity of the organization. So not even within the GCC, not all organizations are at the same level. So we did, I think you saw some of the survey results I had in there, but we did a survey back in Q4 of 2018, and there is a big, well, sizable gap. I wouldn't say a huge gap, but there's a sizable gap between leaders and laggards even in the GCC. So I'll take one industry without going into naming individual companies, but let's say the banking industry. You have, and we also, by the way, did retail as well. So we have banks that are very well ahead in their transformations. And I mean, usually they combine a digital transformation with a customer experience being a key pillar of their digital transformation. And then you have many that don't even have a strategy yet around how to do it. And the ones that do it's a piece of paper that hasn't been really materially put in place. The challenges I see in the laggards is the strategies look good, mainly because they hire consultants to develop them. The problem is in the implementation. And in the implementation, the moving parts in the organization don't move in unison, and they don't have the right skill sets sometimes. The IT systems legacy are difficult to change in some industries. It varies from industry to industry, but let's take the banking industry or the telco industry. The legacy IT is so expensive and has such a long shelf life that trying to customize it for the needs of the future becomes very time consuming and expensive. So the IT transformation is a big challenge. In my opinion, talent is a big challenge, but typically this talent gets either seconded from consulting firms or outsourced firms. So that gap tends to get filled relatively easily. But talent within the organization is difficult to build. So IT, talent, and the final part is organization and governance. The legacy organization just doesn't work, and their attempts to build these squad teams and agile teams has not been extremely successful unless an outsourced, let's say, IT specialist that comes in and manages that for them is taking over. So these are the main challenges I've seen. What maybe you can give us some idea from your organization or what you've seen.
Yeah, so I mean that's quite relative as to what you're saying. Al-Futtaim is, as you know, a large organization with a lot of moving parts, and in some of the talks there's a lot of mention of organizations that are large who have a big difficulty in kind of moving in an agile, fast way. And I don't mean agile in the relative term, in the term that's used, but just the flexibility is not there, right? I was part of this team that from the onset that implemented some semblance of all of these pillars within Al-Futtaim Retail. We started in 2017, end of 2017, and I think for us the biggest challenge by far has been the cultural element. Getting the grassroots to adopt the values and the way of working, and closing the loop for the sake of learning and adapting and bringing in improvements instead of doing it for the sake of just getting rid of that complaint. That's been the most difficult part, because getting the strategy in place and then connect. I mean, it's relatively easy for us, although we have such a diverse set of legacy systems. We connected all of the systems that could possibly connect to.
You did that. You did that in patchwork, or you completely
Yeah, so it's a bit of both. What we did was, considering that we have anybody from IKEA who is a mature organization to maybe the Ace and the Toys R Us of the world that are slightly back in the row in terms of maturity, even from a tech standpoint. We have anywhere from WinPOS POS systems that were made in 1980 to MPOS systems in some of the brands that were recently made. So what we did was a bit of a both, where we connected the systems directly, which could connect directly. So we used Medallia. That was the easy part. For the other systems, for the sake of standardization, we created a Boomi middle layer, and we connected all of the POS systems and even the commerce platforms to that to keep the data standard, get it transformed there and pushed into Medallia. And then also we connected we had an upstream downstream connectivity between Medallia and the contact center system, so that when the customer calls, we know how the satisfaction is, and vice versa. If the customer rates the contact center agent, it goes back to Medallia. So I mean, it took a couple of years to at least get to that stage where we are now. But I mean, if I look at it in terms of effort, to this day, the one thing that is the most frustrating, as well as takes most effort, is actually doing all the hard work, looking back, and then not seeing the adoption at the ground level.
Okay, here's my take on it. Look, culture. You mentioned the word culture. What is culture? Culture is, if you look at, culture came from the word of actual culture, not organizational culture. So actual societal culture. How long does it take to change a culture in a society? And I don't mean that as a question, it's rhetorical. It just takes a long time. You cannot really transform a societal culture. And the organization, of course, is not as big as a society, but culture takes time to change. But culture is not a thing. It's a combination of multiple enablers that over time create a culture. And that culture, transforming a culture, requires time and requires nodding and pushing in that direction continuously using different means. So the fact that you've put in place the right IT tools, that's one of the building blocks of making sure that culture eventually happens. But now you need to make sure adoption happens. How do you make sure adoption happens? Training and recruiting champions from outside of the organization that know these things and start injecting it into the organization, because through these new people that know how to use these systems and know what is design thinking and know what is data science and analytics and can use it, then the environment is created in the organization for that. The problem is most organizations that are legacy, and I don't mean your organization, esteemed organization, but many organizations, they fail to attract such digital talent, let's call them, and retain them, because those people want to work in an organization that is already agile. So you have a chicken and egg situation. If you want to recruit these people, they come in, they get disappointed because they cannot do what they want to do in an efficient way because the organizational legacy and hierarchy prevents them, and they leave. So what I've seen is organizations that want to nod the company in a certain direction start creating centers of excellence for certain functions and skill sets. These center of excellence start by recruiting from outside, putting in one or two of the best people they have from the organization on that particular subject, bringing in some external, let's say, outsourced vendors or consultant partners to complement and provide that skill set. And you have, for example, a center of excellence on analytics, a center of excellence on, let's say, design thinking, and they start working with the rest of the organization, providing that skills, and with the hopes, together with ongoing training and on-the-job work with such center of excellence, you start diffusing that new way of working and using these tools across the organization. It takes time. It's not easy. You're not a startup that got, opened its shop yesterday and has just set up the state-of-the-art IT using AWS for cloud and all the other software tools, and a bunch of people who are young and digitally savvy and know these skills. If you're an organization that has legacy and you need to start moving that ship gradually in that direction of that culture that you want to establish. So this is what I see in most of the organizations that I work with, is you need to put in place all the moving parts that constitute a culture and start nodding each one of them in the direction you want it to go, using various tools to eventually, over, let's say, 2 to 3 years, disseminate that culture, that change of the culture in the organization. Does that make sense?
100%. Yes, agreed. I think some of the things that we have done is job redesign and embedding, some of the cultural aspects that we look for from the talent of the future in the recruitment process and stuff like that. But as you clearly said, it's slow progress on that front, because there are so many different moving parts that eventually results in that culture.
Exactly. And I forgot to mention, some of the very, very important parts. So culture, culture at the household level, you're in a family, culture comes from the parents. And the parents, if they practice something, not only say, oh no, don't lie, but if the parents themselves lie, then the children start lying. The organization is the same. Leadership has to not only talk, but walk the walk, which means sometimes you need to inject new leadership into the organization that actually believes in this new stuff and put it as part of the board. Look at your board. Does it have people who are customer centric and have a very, very sharp focus on customer experience and understand design thinking and journey mapping, at least at a high level, managerial level, so that when they go to the middle level managers in the organization, they demand these data. They demand decisions based on data. They demand the work to be done in squads. So it comes from the top. If the top is able to live and work in that way, the rest of the organization over time starts seeing that this is important and takes it more seriously. Training, recruiting, organizational structure. If the organization, like the IT will not transform your culture, but IT needs to be put in place for that culture to eventually transform. And the same with organizational structure. If you have siloed organizational structure where you have different departments with their own KPIs and metrics and measures, it's never going to look at things cross silo. But if you start putting in place the right organizational structure, it might not happen that day, but with all the different elements put in place, it eventually will move and nudge in that direction. Okay. Do you have any other?
Mohsen? Yes, I'm Mohsen, if I may say. Could you open the chat? There is a few questions from Firas.
Okay, I'm not an expert in Zoom. I use Microsoft Teams,
Okay.
so allow me a bit of time.
Firas, I believe.
Yeah, I'll just ask it verbally. So slide 32, you talked about.
Let's move to slide 32. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, you talked about linking the metrics. How would you go about 32?
Yeah, it's just a delay. There's a delay in the.
Oh, okay.
1 second. Okay, yeah, here we go.
So yeah, this is the cause effect model. Amazing. How would I go about also linking this with the organizational objective and goals?
Very, very good question. So just to preface this discussion, in my previous life, I used to be a balanced scorecard and Norton Kaplan certified expert on this topic. So this is an area that I'm very passionate about, measurement at the corporate level. But the same approach, the same methodologies are at any level of the organization you can use. So your question is, how do you make sure that whatever metrics you develop for CX are aligned with the overall corporate level objective? Did I understand correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. So look, it doesn't go from bottom to up. It goes from top to down. So in any organization, you should have, theoretically you should have, maybe sometimes it's not the best way they've done it, but most organizations have a strategy. In that strategy, they have some strategic objectives. Those objectives should have some KPIs linked to them. that are being measured at the corporate level. And these are things that the board and the CEO are monitoring either monthly or quarterly or semi-annually, in whatever fashion that they monitor it. So these are things like, increased share of wallet of the, I don't know, high value retail customers, or gain more customers in the SME segment, for example, or improve the value proposition or improve customer satisfaction at XYZ segment. So these are at corporate level objectives. What happens at that corporate level is that they take each of the functions and activities in the organization, including CX, and they start, there's an actual methodology around this. They start trying to align and cascade those high level objectives at the corporate with what they see that as your responsibility in your particular function. Let's assume your department is CX or marketing or sales. So there's a certain methodology of alignment and cascading that happens at that level. This is a combination of quantitative and qualitative. So for example, you have at the corporate level, increase the share of wallet of the high value customer segments in retail. Let's say you're a bank, okay? So at that level, then it comes to the marketing department, certain KPIs that are related to increasing the market share, for example. Then for customer experience, they create, based on analytics and data, they do a regression analysis. So you need an analytics specialist with data scientists to create a formula quantified based on historical data that your systems have. And this is the point that I think the previous question was saying, that their IT systems are linked to allow for this to happen. You create a formula link using your data scientists, say, for every X% increase in my CSAT score for the onboarding journey or that journey or this journey, what percent impact does it have on share of wallet for the high value customer segment in retail for my bank? And that formula then, once you use the data and you quantify it, that formula then applies to your target setting. And based on that, you create a link between what your objective, what your high level targets are for your department, how it's driving the corporate level targets and KPIs that have been set at the corporate level. Okay. Now, if you want me to go into the details of that, how that is done, there's a certain tools called keyword objective descriptions, keyword design, and then you use driver models based on Excel or based on we use Excel because we don't have the sophistication of advanced tools, but you can use various software tools to do regression analysis, for example, SAS or other models that are also possible to use. And then you quantify the actual targets. So first, you define the objectives at the corporate level and the KPIs, then you develop KPIs at your level, your departmental level. This is in collaboration with the head of strategy at the corporate level, because you don't want to work in silos. It's a cascading and alignment approach. You don't work by yourself here. Once the KPIs at your level are defined, the target setting needs to happen. What are the targets? Again, based using the same data and data science and regression analysis, you have the formulas. Based on those formulas, you can set the targets for the year. That's a very high level. I try to simplify it as much as possible, but there's a lot of data.
It's just because I've seen in the past, as you just mentioned, the CX function a lot of times work in isolation.
Yes.
Yeah, and their focus, their ultimate primary goal is increasing, the satisfaction rating.
Exactly. Which they don't know where it's going. Exactly.
Yeah, and that's not really the primary objective. Okay, great. That makes a lot of sense. Another question, if possible, have you worked with any government entities before?
We have worked government on the policy side, so not on the actual government's own operations. For example, we've gotten some RFPs, for example, especially in Saudi, for ministry that were in charge of customs and other departments of the various ministries but we haven't actually done that work for them. What we have done is on the policy side related to digital transformation and customer experience.
No, that's not. So yeah, I just wanted to see if you have an opinion on the kind of primary differences between the private sector and public sector when it comes to the operating model, with the caveat that government it's very hard to change.
Yes.
I mean, even private sector, but government it's even harder. You know, it's not something that the minister can actually even approve. It has to go to the cabinet of ministers, for example.
But actually, I'll tell you something. Sorry to interject, but maybe you can. I'll just jump in here, and then you can continue. So look, government sector. I've worked in other types of projects with government sector, not specifically CX operating model transformation. Government sector, yes, it's bureaucratic, it's slow, and there's a lot of non-financial, non-commercial decisions and objectives and considerations that they take. But I assume you're in Saudi or UAE?
Yes, I am in Saudi.
So in Saudi, you would see, for example, a lot of organizations, non-governmental organizations, but because they have a legacy of government ownership and they still have partially government ownership, there's a lot of political interference in the organization. So for example, the head of the Riyadh province region asks for the bank branch to remain open in this particular municipality because he wants to make sure that his people have access to the branch. But in reality, the bank doesn't want to close those branches. So there's a lot of political interference that happens in the semi-governmental or formerly or quasi-government commercial entities. And I've worked a lot with those types of entities. So you can look at anything from, let's say, Riyadh Bank to STC. Well, STC has changed a lot, but it's still legacy government ownership. There's a lot of that type of interference. Second part is governments, especially ministries, have a lot of the parts of the journey are not under their control. So because they're interacting with other ministries and other organizations, they don't control the end-to-end journey often. So there's a lot of coordination that needs to happen to be able to do end-to-end customer journey redesign. And it's very bureaucratic. But you can say the same with corporations. So for example, if you're a company that mostly works through partners in your distribution and you don't work direct in retail, so for example, let's say you're STC, you have, or a bank, you have your branches or your sales shops and you have your own portal or mobile application, but you also sell top-up cards through distributors, through mom and pop shops or grocery stores. You don't control that part of that customer experience. So you need to have, remember in the skill sets we put in one of the slides, ecosystem management and partner management. So you need to have the right skill sets in this, not only in the CX team, in the whole organization that knows how to work with the partners so that the parts of the journey that are not directly under your control, you might not be making those completely the same seamless experience as the rest of the journey parts that are under your control, but you can improve it dramatically by having the right relationship with those partners. This can be both in a business sense, so you have right procurement policies, right, let's say team structures and SLAs with your partners to make sure that they actually work with you in these, but also the right IT tools. In digitally transformed organizations, they use APIs, external APIs, to link their own IT with their partner IT, so that when they want to launch a certain particular, let's say, a change in an application, the partner is able to leverage the various systems and data and IT that the organization already has, and they're able to work a bit more seamlessly between them from an IT perspective as well. So those are my insights. I don't know if that covered.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think it's a tricky situation, but especially since there's been a lot of transformation in the Gulf in general when it comes to, how to improve, customer experience, especially within the services.
What do you see? What organization are you at, and what do you see as the big problem? I assume you're working in the government sector.
So I'm in a semi-government. It's one of the Saudi Vision programs.
Yeah.
Realization program. So what we do, we more or less orchestrate and work with different entities within the Hajj and Umrah sector.
Okay, so you have the unenviable task of coordination.
Yes, yes. And what we're trying to do is actually we want them to start adapting, these different frameworks.
Okay, what levers do you have? What levers do you have to encourage them or force them, or I mean, what have you been provided to push them and nudge them in that direction?
Not a lot, unfortunately. See, that's the problem. We are جهة رقابية نعتبر يعني. We actually monitor and we do raise and audit them. So we do raise, like quarterly reports to the central government. That's the only kind of today real tool that we have to enable us to.
Okay, so I mean, I haven't worked directly in this part of the situation, but what I can say is, if you look at any normal organization, non-governmental, when there is a lack of skill sets in that particular department, like I said, I think in one of the slides, you set up a center of excellence or a center of competence on a particular topic, and you second or push those experts. So you have a center, let's I mean, this is theoretical, but you can, for example, create a center of excellence on customer journey mapping, which might not be something the skill set that is available in the rest of these organizations you're trying to coordinate. And then you tell those organizations, look, I'm auditing you on whether you're doing journey mapping and end-to-end journey measurement or whatever else it is. But I also have a center of excellence here with me that I can provide you as consultants to help you make sure that you're doing it the right way. So I'm both auditing you, but I'm also giving you the necessary skill sets and tools to work with your team and start nudging you in that direction. This is, for example, in a normal or in a non-governmental commercial organization, the way you build analytics capabilities in an organization. If you're a laggard and it's the very beginning, you set up a center of excellence and you push those people into the organization and start providing internal consultancy in the organization, and start letting those departments work with these experts so that over time they learn the benefits of analytics and they start wanting to recruit their own analytics people.
Makes sense. Serve as an advisor. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I love that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be more than happy to share. Like I said, most of the same tools that are in commercial businesses, to some extent, can be fine-tuned to use in or corporate environments, government environments. The only difference is in government. If you look at it from the high-level objectives, corporations at the end of the day get measured by the dollars and profits. So that's the biggest measure. Whereas the government have other high-level objectives, so societal benefits, political considerations, in addition to the, let's say, cost and profit elements that some ministries and governments have. Are there any other questions? Maybe we can have time, or just.
Thank you, Mohsen, by the way.
Do we have more time, or are we done? Do we have more time, or is it the end of the session?
Yes, Mohsen, you got time till 2:40.
Okay, so we'll take one more question. Sorry, somebody was speaking. Is there another question?
I believe no one has any more questions. Sakina, do you have any questions to be asked?
Not really. Thank you. Thank you very much for this nice session. I really like it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for attending. Hopefully it was insightful. So Fahmid, if there are no other questions, I think I'm done. So do we want to close this session?
Yes, I've got one more last poll, just a general poll. I just want to share it.
Okay. Sorry, we bombarded you with all the polls today.
No, this is the normal poll which I do for. There you go.
Okay, I'll put this nice slide at the end so it's entertaining you up. So I'm hoping everybody was familiar with the slides. This is Seinfeld, one of my favorite sitcoms.
But this is not the best slide, I think, to put up. It's the last episode of the entire season.
Yeah, but that was the point. It's we're ready to move on. So this is I didn't think many people would, because this is my generation. I'm a Gen Z, Gen X. So this was one of the favorite sitcoms of the time. Okay, so
All right, that should be good, Mohsen.
okay, great. Thank you very much for attending. And if you have any questions, you can contact me directly, either through this contact. Sorry, I'll put up the last slide at the end. You can contact me through these contacts listed here, which is somewhere here. Sorry. Through these contacts here, or through the conference event itself, and I'll be more than happy to share any insights wherever I can. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.